The federal government is appealing to Nigerians not to proceed with the nationwide nationwide protest slated for tomorrow, the 1st of August. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, made the plea at the World Press Conference in Abuja today. The conference was attended by top government officials. According to Akume, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration is making efforts to solve the challenges facing the nation. He said several interventions by the government will eventually improve conditions of living.
The issue of minimum wage from 30,000 to 70,000 naira, an increase of over 100%. This I want to emphasize because constructive engagement is more important, it's preferable, and more result-oriented.
Beyond even the payment of the school fees, there is also the provision, once your school fees is being paid, there is also the provision of pocket money so that you don't also get starved while you are working. This is very important. So your school fees will be paid, but in addition to that, you also have something in your pocket for your upkeep throughout the duration of your education. And this is already ongoing. And like I said, over 120,000 applications have already been treated. There is also the Nigerian Youth Investment Fund, NYIF. The Federal Executive Council in March of 2024 approved the takeoff of the restructured Nigerian Youth Investment Fund with an initial seed capital of 110 billion.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined in the studio by the lawyer and writer, Chukwumerije, and also the current affairs analyst and dean of School of Postgraduate Studies at Bayes University, Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeneye. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Let me start with you, Dike. How do you perceive current happenings in Nigeria today as it relates to what we will be seeing tomorrow?
There is a suffocating cost of living crisis. I think that's the defining feature in Nigerian life today. The high cost of food, the high cost of fuel, the high cost of transportation, side by side with the lavish lifestyles of high and prominent government officials. And I think it's that dichotomy between the impoverishment of the ordinary and the largesse of the elite that is the real source of conflict and tension in society. So that's how I see things in Nigeria today.
And so, Professor Denny, let's talk a bit more about that dichotomy because it's real. Mm-hmm. Perhaps when the government came into power, or even now, if there's a frantic effort made to cut off a lot of the expenses or expenditure that we see, do you think that would sort of change the mood of the nation?
Yeah, definitely.
If not dramatically, at least some change.
Definitely, you know, because leadership really is not so much about what the leaders say, but it's about what they do. And in our situation, oftentimes, we see our leaders say one thing and they do the complete opposite. And this can be very, very provocative. Because action, of course, we don't speak louder than voice. But in saying this, we may not necessarily generalize because we have pockets of difference, you know, but the difference is just so marginal and inconsequential when you compare it with the majority of leaders, you know, who are wound, you know, to show us opulence, you know, in your face opulence, you know, which can be very, very provocative amidst poverty and want and lack. And of course, sometimes you also see their words displaying luxury right before us. You know, these are the unsaid things that can be very annoying, and that I think is constantly agitating the youths and propelling people to think that they should protest, irrespective of the right things that many government officials are saying. They are saying the right things, trying to assuage people, engaging directly or indirectly, like the Inspector General of Police, for instance, the ministers. Yes, they are doing the right things, trying to mitigate, assuage them, appeal to them. Quite all right. We know, we agree that government is making efforts, but beyond the things, beyond their pronouncement, it's also the need for us to see some of their pronouncement being reflected in their actions, so that sincerity, faith can be projected, in their messaging, as the case could be.
So, the World Press Conference today, I don't know if you had time to listen to it, but there was one striking observation. At the background or backdrop of the event, so you had a younger picture of President Bola Tinubu, and then of course you had the ministerial press briefing in bold, but also at the podium where the ministers were speaking, there was something striking there. It says, opposition elements are trying to destroy our country just like they did to Lagos during NSAS. Was there need for that? It was there, right there.
Absolutely no need for that. This has nothing to do with opposition elements. This has everything to do with a cost of living crisis that has been inflicted on the people by the policies of the government. And the government hasn't taken steps to assuage that cost of living crisis. It's been over a year. The allusion to the opposition, I think it's simply politics and trying to distract from the reality of what is happening. There is always the fear of anything being hijacked. But nobody says stop flying planes because there's a risk of accident, or don't travel to your village, or don't travel anymore because there's a risk of being kidnapped on the road, or don't go to work because there's a risk of being robbed. If there is a peaceful protest, there's always a risk of things happening, but that's why you have the police and you have the government to provide the context for people to exercise their democratic rights peacefully. So for a government to say, don't protest because it will be hijacked, you are commenting on your own incapacity to provide a peaceful environment for people to exercise their democratic rights. You might as well tell us not to go out of our houses because we can be robbed. So it's completely unnecessary, and I think you're simply playing propaganda, and government shouldn't play propaganda. The yam and the knife is in your hand. It is in your hand to make life a bit better, a bit easier for ordinary Nigerians. So do the work and leave the talking to those that are outside of government.
And so, Prof, let's stay on that a little bit, that inscription at the backdrop, because there have been several references to the NSAS protest. But when you have something like that, it seems like the government is not even hearing what people are saying to be able to put up that kind of poster in a World Press Conference where they are trying to appeal to people to be patient.
Well, I think we may look at it in the realm of communication. Sometimes you may just want to say, you want to convey a message, and of course your strategy might just be wrong, or your tactics might be wrong. Your strategy is right, but your tactics is wrong, But even though the tactics is wrong, the message is still conveying all the same. Sometimes you may refer these, you may call this guerrilla communication, But of course, an exchange, some meaning has been put across, So it might be their intention ordinarily, but the moral of it is that it's might not be right in the circumstance, but of course there has been a conveyance, as the case could be, Yeah, but I want to believe also that they have advisors, people are guiding them, we may not know these people, they might just be in the background, guiding them appropriately. Sometimes they might just be there thinking that they should rely on these consultants who tell them what to do, and of course in telling them what to do, they miss the mark, which is why we as citizens can actually spot these things and identify it, and of course tell them that these tactics might be wrong in the circumstance. But overall, it's been the issue has been actually weather beaten, well discussed, the protest, whether it should take place or not, but from all indication it is going to happen, but the scale at which it's going to happen is what we do not know. But the overarching call, or the general call that seems very, very reasonable, is that it should not degenerate. Violence is probably not necessary in the circumstance, but of course we can pass the message across, in the manner in which we want to pass it. We've been talking, we've been conversing, we've been sending messages, but it seems that it's not been effective. Now, we want to push it forward. Protest being an advanced form of complaining. We want to get to that level where we'll go physical. But in being physical does not mean we should be violent. And I think this is okay, constitutional, legitimate, and all the right things.
So the Secretary to the Government of the Federation spoke during that conference, and he made reference to when he was younger. He said that he engaged in the protest of Ali Must Go. It was a very popular protest at that time. And he also explained that, well, according to him, that protest amounted to nothing. So essentially he was saying protests amount to nothing. He said Ali went on to be a minister. What do you make of what he said?
Nigeria is a result of Nigeria owes so much to our tradition of protests, going all the way back to the Aba Women's Revolt, 1929, that led to the abolition of the warrant chief tenancy system. Aba Women's Revolt, mid-1940s, that helped to give women representation in local councils, ended unfair taxation for women. The 1945 general strike that galvanized the nationalist movement that led to independence. The protest of 1962 that led to the abrogation of the Anglo-Nigerian Defense Pact that have made Nigeria a pawn in the Cold War. So Nigeria has been shaped and advanced by protests. There are many important, the democracy we're enjoying, the fruit of protest. And the 1978 Ali Must Go protest helped to bring the voice of students and youths into the national discourse. That is a benefit in itself. And so to turn around and say that, oh, nothing came out of it, is really to disparage the young people that lost their lives in that protest. Sometimes as Nigerians, when we make these comments, we don't realize that people paid the ultimate price to advance a cause. And sometimes it may look as if you don't make progress in the moment, but your action can inspire generations to come. So if you think about civil rights struggle in other countries, in South Africa, in America, in South Africa, Soweto, 1974, 13-year-old students were shot in the streets. It's a figure like the SGF could have looked at the Soweto protests and said, what did they achieve? They were killed, they didn't achieve anything. But without Soweto, 1974, there will have been no Mandela, 1994, 20 years later. So it's very short-sighted to look at the sacrifice of patriots and say it amounts to nothing. Protests are a very important part of a democratic culture and have played a significant role in bringing Nigeria to where it is today. They
have also said that about the NSAS protests, that at the end of the day they didn't achieve, which some think is a grave mistake to say that.
It is, because in NSAS we saw the awakening of a generation, and they made their voices heard in the 2023 elections. We saw young people coming out en masse. Who knows where that wave is going to carry on? The essence of protest, even if you don't make objective progress in the moment, it has an inspirational effect for generations to come. People can look back and say, oh, they did that, therefore we can do this. So the act of standing up for what you truly believe is never a waste of time.
So what do you think this protest says about the state of youth engagement in politics in this country?
Well, I think we're in an age of youth bulge, where the mass of Nigerian population, or the majority of Nigeria's population, are actually youthful. And of course, young people are doing lots in the 21st century, being very creative, being very ingenious in the tech business, in triggering economies, stimulating societies, and Nigeria cannot be different. And in terms of agitation, we're also seeing them coming up. And I agree entirely that NSAS protest was not a failure in terms of conscientization of the youth, sensitization, and awakening them around the possibilities embedded in them, not just for the present, but also for the future. And yes, we are seeing them in politics as well. Some of them are probably disappointing, yes, but it doesn't really matter, Some are also very, very outstanding, and we could see to some extent the government also recognizing this and getting a lot of them involved in government as ministers. So it just means that increasingly we are seeing youths making some consequential statements at different levels. And if they are coming out this time to say they want to protest, it's just a continuation of the narrative. The soundtrack is continuing. But again, that point will have to be continuously made, that the protest, if it happens, like we think that it will happen, should be purposeful, it should be very strategic, shouldn't be destructive, so that the youths, the young ones, will not be labeled. They'll be seen for what they are, as a feature of a nation, a vibrant set in our population, and of course a demographic, that is futuristic, capable of moving the nation to the proverbial next level.
So in his speech, the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister for the Economy, Mr. Wale Edu, did say that industries are growing, led by the ICT, services, and solid minerals. And he clearly said there was a momentum, and the government doesn't want that momentum to be slowed down. Do you agree that there is a momentum? Or are they living in an alternative reality?
I think that they are living in a parallel world. And of course, there must be some progress somewhere. Something must be growing somewhere. But the point is that there is enormous drag on the economy constituted by the waste and corruption in the government itself. An austerity policy cannot work unless it is accompanied by a serious commitment to institutional and structural reform within the government itself. If all the money we are saving by asking ordinary people to tighten their belts is going to expand the stomachs of the elites in power, then you're simply robbing the poor to make the privileged richer. And that is the problem. It's not the policy itself, so to speak. And Nigeria was in a bad economic or financial straits, and almost any government would have instituted this raft or a similar raft of policies. But it's the sincerity and the commitment of the policy implementer that makes the difference. And in this case, these austerity measures being imposed on the people are not backed by a commensurate effort on the part of the government to reform itself, because that is what would make that policy work. So the character, the sincerity, the integrity, the patriotism of the policy implementer is important. It is not patriotic in the least to be buying brand new cars from abroad at a time when foreign exchange is so bad. Billions are being spent giving houses to privileged people. And then you go to the market and people can't buy yam, they can't buy gari, they can't buy tomato, they can't buy anything to eat. And then you're talking about there's some growth in the service sector. Of course there will be growth somewhere. But that drag being constituted by a bloated, indisciplined ruling class is the issue that needs to be tackled.
Professor Abiodun Adeni Dike Chukwumerije, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, that's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. It's goodbye and thank you for watching.